Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Renuka and with me is Navneet Singh bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring to you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reaches Indonesia on 3-day visit to attend 17th G20 Summit in Bali to deliberate upon key issues of global concern at the summit. Mission Life is a global mass movement which promotes environmentally conscious lifestyle at individual level, says India at COP27 summit in Egypt. UN Chief Antonio Guterres expressed hope that Russia will extend Black Sea grain deal to ensure global food security. UK and France sign agreement to tackle illegal migration. Turkish police arrest 47 people including Syrian woman for planting bomb in connection with Istanbul street blast. India International Trade Fair begins in New Delhi with theme Vocal for Local, Local to Global. Spanish film director and writer Carlos Saura to be given Satyajit Ray Lifetime Achievement Award at 53rd International Film Festival of India in Goa. And now the news in detail. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi reached Indonesia on Monday on a 3-day visit to attend the 17th G20 Summit in Bali. Mr. Modi received a warm welcome from the Indian community on his arrival. During the summit, G20 leaders will deliberate extensively upon key issues of global concern. This year's theme of the summit is Recover Together, Recover Stronger. 3 working sessions will be held as part of the G20 summit agenda. These are food and energy security, health and digital transformation. The G20 summit program also includes a leader's visit to a mangrove forest in Bali on the 16th of this month. On the sidelines of the summit, Indian Prime Minister will have several bilateral interactions with the G20 leaders to brief them on India's evolving G20 priorities. He will also address and interact with the Indian community in Bali. In his departure statement ahead of his visit, Prime Minister Modi said that he will highlight India's achievements and unwavering commitment to collectively address global challenges during his interactions. Mr. Modi said India's G20 presidency will be grounded in the theme Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or One Earth, One Family, One Future, which underlines the message of equitable growth and a shared future for all. At the closing session of the summit, the Indonesian president will symbolically hand over the G20 presidency to Prime Minister Modi. India will formally assume the G20 presidency from 1st of December this year.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on India-ASEAN relations and the 17th East Asia Summit. In conversation, our former diplomat Skandharanjan Tayal and AIR correspondent S. Ranga Bhashyam.
Ambassador Skandharanjan Tayal, we have been talking and discussing about ASEAN-India relations, the 19th ASEAN-India Summit and the 17th East Asia Summit held in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. As we talk about these summits and issues, this particular year, 2022, is commemorated as the Friendship Year, commemorating 30 years of relationship with ASEAN. In the last 3 decades, Ambassador Tayal, what would you say, how far has we come as far as cooperation between India and ASEAN is concerned?
In 1992, 30 years back, the first contact between India and ASEAN started rather tentatively, and India was only a sectoral dialogue partner. But from 2003 onwards, the relationship grew very rapidly, and since 2005, India started having annual summits with ASEAN, and now we have the 19th ASEAN-India Summit. And from dialogue partnership to strategic partnership, and now the relationship was raised to comprehensive strategic partnership, which shows how seriously the two sides take this relationship, that it is in the importance of both India and the 10 members of ASEAN. And in growth, trade, which was hardly about maybe less than 10 billion, has now reached $100 billion. There is investment of India in ASEAN as well as ASEAN countries in India, which is $40 billion from India, and from ASEAN to India, $70 billion. And the scale of relationship is very vast, very comprehensive. And in June, we had a special ASEAN-India Foreign Ministers meeting, which was chaired by our External Affairs Minister, Shri S. Jaishankar, on 16 June 2022, on the topic building bridges in the Indo-Pacific to strengthen and deepen strategic partnership. So while there has always been strong economic component in India-ASEAN relations, the effort now is to enhance the strategic component of the relationship. And one aspect that later this month there will be meeting of India's defense minister with the defense ministers of ASEAN countries, and also perhaps a maritime exercise in 2023.
Mr. Tayal, as you mentioned the Indo-Pacific region, what do you think is a major cause of concern not only for India but also for all the member countries of ASEAN? Is it the issues related to the South China Sea?
There are 2-3 issues which are of major concern. One, of course, is the post-COVID recovery of the economy of the world. And now it has been disrupted by the Ukraine war. So food security and energy security have also come on the table. And most of the countries of ASEAN as well as India are net importers of energy. So that will be one aspect. And the second is the strategic aspect that gradually China is increasing its grip on South China Sea, belying all the promises given by President Xi Jinping to President Barack Obama. China has militarized features and islands and islets in South China Sea, and it is very blatantly violating the sovereign right of several ASEAN states like Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia. And even when there is a international law arbitration award against China, which has gone in favor of Philippines, China refuses to adhere and follow that award. Also, there is a attempt to have a code of conduct in the South China Sea, that how every country will conduct itself, but China has been dilly-dallying for last 2 decades, and the ASEAN members who have maritime boundary in South China Sea facing this threat and this pressure from an expansionist China.
Ambassador Tayal, let's also talk about the cultural connect. If you see each of these countries, it is Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, the Hindu culture, and there are a number of similarities. Ramayana is enacted maybe in a different format and different form altogether. And for example, in Singapore, Tamil happens to be an official language. And in Vietnam, we have Cambodia, we have the pagodas and temples where the architecture is very similar, akin to, architecture of temples in Tamil Nadu, Garuda in Indonesia, and so on and so forth. So don't you think that cultural connect among ASEAN countries as well as India is really strong?
It is very strong from about 3rd, 4th century to 12th, 13th century. India's civilizational influence, religious influence, spiritual influence was predominant all over Southeast Asia. The Group of 20 meeting will be in Bali. If one goes to Bali, it is an entirely Hindu culture and temples are there. Similarly, Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and in Laos, Buddhist is the national religion. So this connection is very strong. And once I had participated in ASEAN cultural program, and 5 of the members had dances based on some part of Ramayana. So that shows how Ramayana as well as Mahabharata are very well known in these countries, and we need to build on these cultural connections.
But when we talk about the social cultural aspect, also economic aspect, the relation between India and ASEAN have predominantly been on these lines, socio-cultural and economic. But from here on, do you think it should move on to a strategic relationship also involving defense forces or say joint maritime exercises and all?
My own view is that ASEAN works on the basis of unanimity, and in ASEAN some countries like Cambodia and Laos are very close to China. Even Myanmar now is perhaps a little close to China. So this defense relationship, in my assessment, may not be possible with ASEAN as a group, as an entity as a collective entity. But India has already been building very strong bilateral defense relationship with
each of the
important countries of ASEAN, like Vietnam, like Indonesia, like Malaysia, and that will be the way to go. Defense relationship more bilaterally and economic relationship both bilaterally and with ASEAN.
We have a forthcoming meeting on the 20th of November of Defense Minister of ASEAN countries. So could that be a starting point for relationship in defense?
I believe it will be an informal meeting and it can be a starting point, and that is our effort to enhance and expand the role of ASEAN, because if ASEAN claims centrality in entire East Asia, then it cannot shy away from dealing with strategic issues, with very important political issues. And what the world is seeing, that assessment of many independent observers is that ASEAN is not able to have its act together and is playing a rather passive role, whether it is the Myanmar crisis. ASEAN has not been able to come with a firm policy how to deal with the military government in Tatmadaw in Myanmar, and similarly in South China Sea, ASEAN has not been able to take a collective position in spite of very open aggression and expansionist actions of China. So there is this thing is coming to now being questioned, and India's attempt is to strengthen ASEAN and decision-making process and to nudge it in a direction that it plays a role which it claims it has.
When the formal relationship with ASEAN started 30 years back in 1992, we used to call it the Look East policy, and from Look East we shifted to Act East policy, and in the year 2018, India invited 10 ASEAN member countries, the leaders of these 10 countries, as chief guests for the Republic Day celebrations. Don't you think that kind of very clearly shows to the world the kind of importance India gives to ASEAN?
That India, by its actions and our successive Prime Ministers, have given this message very clearly to ASEAN as a collective entity as well as to the 10 members of ASEAN, that India sees its own economic progress of our very important Northeast region, depending on having very close economic linkages with Southeast Asia in general and in ASEAN, and going right up to Republic of Korea and Japan. And in that, the correct connectivity issue becomes very important. The roads which are being constructed from Manipur, from our northeast through Myanmar up to Thailand, they need to be constructed fast, but because of the military coup in Myanmar, there has been a little hiccup, and this connectivity is standing in the way. But India's commitment to have very deep economic, social, cultural, strategic ties with ASEAN as well as the individual members of ASEAN is very clear and is very well appreciated by the 10 members of ASEAN.
Ambassador Tayal, thank you so much for joining us on this program.
Thank you very much.
Chinese President Xi Jinping met the US President Joe Biden in person on Monday at Bali in Indonesia on sidelines of G20 summit. This was the first in-person meeting between both the leaders since President Xi secured his third term. According to statements released from both sides, the two leaders also exchanged views on the Taiwan issue, Ukraine crisis and other issues. Union Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change Bhupendra Yadav launched the MOEFCC UNDP Compendium Prayas Se Prabhav Tak, from mindless consumption to mindful utilization, on the sidelines of COP27 in Egypt on Monday. The compendium was launched during an event based on understanding the concept of life, lifestyle for environment, held at Inter Pavilion at COP27. The compendium highlights India's traditional best practices and key behavior change frameworks. It also proposes a life framework to move towards mindful utilization of resources. Addressing the event, the minister said the world is at a critical juncture in the joint fight against climate change, a juncture which requires not just government effort but the contribution from all stakeholders, each individual, towards ensuring a sustainable and equitable planet. He said the mantra of life, a lifestyle for environment given by Prime Minister Narendra Modi places individual contribution at the center stage to find solution to problems posed by climate change. Talking about Mission Life, Mr. Yadav said that it is a global mass movement which promotes environmentally conscious lifestyles at the individual level. He said that one must understand that climate change goes beyond just policy making and its effect transcend geopolitical borders.
The second India-Canada Consular Dialogue was held in New Delhi on Monday. External Affairs Ministry said the two sides held wide-ranging discussions on issues of concern to Indian community, which is largest diaspora in Canada. Both sides reiterated their commitment to continue to work towards solving issues relating to citizen-centric issues, including reducing delays in visas. They also agreed to further strengthen bilateral relations through people-to-people exchanges. India and Finland have agreed to carry mutual cooperation between the two countries to a new level in a number of areas of bilateral as well as global interests. Finland Minister of Education and Culture Petri Honkonen called on Union Science and Technology Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh in New Delhi on Monday to seek enhanced bilateral cooperation between the two countries in the field of science, technology and innovation. Two nations decided to enhance cooperation in areas such as digital partnership in future, information and communication technology, future mobile technologies and digital education. India and Finland also emphasized on having institutionalized joint working groups on areas of mutual interest. While Dr. Jitendra Singh reiterated India's focus on collaboration even in startups, the Finland minister was full of praise for Prime Minister Narendra Modi for management of COVID pandemic and also the efforts of the Government of India in ensuring development of vaccines and vaccination for all the countrymen. India and Romania held Foreign Office consultations in New Delhi on Monday. The consultations covered the entire gamut of bilateral relations, including political, economic, commercial, consular and cultural linkages. Both sides also exchanged views on regional and global issues, including developments in the Indo-Pacific, Quad, India's neighborhood, EU-Ukraine conflict, cooperation in multilateral fora, including the UN, UNSC reform and India's G20 presidency.
India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on Monday urged Defence Accounts Department to ensure judicious use of financial resources through quick and transparent decision-making, as it is key to strengthening combat readiness of armed forces. Mr. Singh was speaking at the Controllers Conference organised by Defence Accounts Department in New Delhi. The third edition of the Pan-India Coastal Defence Exercise Sea Vigil 22 will commence on Tuesday. The exercise will be undertaken along the entire 7,516-kilometre coastline and exclusive economic zone of India. It will involve all the coastal states and union territories. The Indian Defence Ministry said this exercise was conceptualized in 2018 to validate various measures that have been instituted towards enhancing maritime security since 26/11 terror attack. This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres voiced hope on Monday that Russia would extend an expiring deal that gives safe passage to Ukrainian grain shipments, saying the arrangement was crucial for food security. Addressing reporters in Bali ahead of a G20 summit, the UN chief said talks over the last week had delivered a lot of progress on the deal that is to end on Saturday. Mr. Guterres said he is hopeful that the Black Sea Grain Initiative will be renewed. He said urgent action is needed to prevent famine and hunger in a growing number of places around the world. Ukraine is one of the world's top grain producers, but its conflict with Russia had blocked 20 million tons of grain in its ports until the United Nations and Turkey brokered the deal in July. Turkey blamed Kurdish militants in northern Syria on Monday for an explosion in Istanbul that killed 6 people. The Turkish police have detained 47 people, including a Syrian woman suspected of planting the bomb. According to police, during questioning, the woman said that she was trained by Kurdish militants and entered Turkey through Afrin, another northern Syrian town. However, the Kurdistan Workers' Party (PKK) in a statement on its website denied involvement and said it would not target civilians. No group had claimed responsibility so far for Sunday's blast on the busy shopping street that left 81 people wounded.
The United Nations Human Rights Council announced on Monday that it would hold an urgent session this month on Iran, where a brutal crackdown on mass protests has left hundreds dead. The United Nations highest rights body said a special session on the human rights situation in Iran would be held on 24th of November. The decision comes after the German and Icelandic ambassadors to the UN in Geneva submitted a request for such a meeting on Friday. The support of 16 of the Human Rights Council's 47 members, that is more than a third, is required to convene a special session outside the 3 regular ones held each year. The UN body said so far 44 countries, including 17 council members, have backed the call. The request follows 8 weeks of protests in Iran, sparked by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini after she was arrested for an alleged breach of the country's strict dress rules for women in the country. At least 326 people have been killed in the crackdown on the protests, according to the Oslo-based group Iran Human Rights. Britain and France on Monday signed an agreement worth €72.2 million to ramp up efforts over the coming year to stop illegal migrants from making perilous journeys across the English Channel. The agreement was inked following talks between British Home Secretary Suella Braverman and her French counterpart Gerald Darmanin in Paris. In a statement after the meeting, Ms. Braverman said, "It is in the interests of both the UK and French governments to work together to solve this complex problem."
Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe presented the much-anticipated annual budget 2023 before the Parliament on Monday. This was his maiden budget in his capacity as the Sri Lanka's Minister of Finance. The budget aims at working on steps to establish stable economic growth through measures involving cut in expenditure and measures to create an internationally competitive workforce. The Sri Lankan president added that the economic difficulties have eased over the past few months to some extent, at a time when the forex reserves of the island nation stand improved at $3.1 billion. Mr. Wickremesinghe exuded confidence in stabilizing the economy after the talks with the International Monetary Fund (IMF). We have a report.
The budgetary proposals hint at an expected growth rate of 7 to 8% through various reforms. Through the reforms, the Sri Lankan president called for creation of an economy tailored to meet the aspirations of the youth that transcends protests and struggles. Several measures to improve balance of payments, including annual growth of exports and foreign direct investments of $3 billion over the next decade, are also proposed. At the same time, new investment zones in western and northwestern provinces are also planned. For World News, Dr. Ahmed Moin Faruqi from Colombo.
The 41st edition of India International Trade Fair (IITF) began in New Delhi on Monday. The fair will continue till 27th of this month. This year, the theme of the trade fair is Vocal for Local, Local to Global. Our correspondent reports that 12 foreign countries, including Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bahrain, Belarus, Iran, Nepal, Thailand, Turkey, UAE and UK are participating in the fair.
Nearly 2,500 domestic and foreign exhibitors are participating in the trade fair to showcase their products and services. The first 5 days of the trade fair are exclusively reserved for business days, and it will open to the general public from 19th of November. The timings of the fair will be 10 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. IITF tickets for both business days as well as general days can be purchased from customer care centers of 67 metro stations. On general days for the public, in case of weekend and holidays, the rates of IITF tickets will be 150 rupees for adult and 60 rupees for child, while on weekdays it will be 80 rupees for adult and 40 rupees for child. On business days, the ticket rates will be higher. For Divyang and senior citizens, the entry into the fair will be free. Anand Kumar, AIR News, Delhi.
Spanish film director and writer Carlos Saura will be conferred the Satyajit Ray Lifetime Achievement Award 2022 at the upcoming 53rd edition of International Film Festival of India at Goa. The announcement was made by the Indian Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting, L. Murugan, in New Delhi on Monday. We have a report.
The international section is an important and the focused area of this time, and more than 180 films have been selected to screen at the festival. A children's film package suggested by UNICEF has been introduced for the first time in IFFI, and which would include the screening of about 7 films. Keeping in line with major international markets like March to Cannes, IFFI this year also introduced the first edition of pavilions, which will house the film officers of the state government, countries, industries, players. 42 pavilions will be showcased at the prestigious festival this time. 75 creative minds of tomorrow will be announced from the 19 states, and the youngest one is 18 years old from the Indian state of Haryana and Maharashtra. The 53rd edition of the International Film Festival of India, IFFI, is set to be held between the 20th to the 28th of November. The IFFI has also announced the lineup for its Indian Panorama segment, in which several feature and non-feature films will be showcased. Vaibhav Jyotsna Srivastav for World News.
World Diabetes Day was observed on Monday. The day provides an opportunity to raise awareness about the diabetes as a global public health issue and what needs to be done, collectively and individually, for better prevention, diagnosis and management of the condition. This year's theme is Access to Diabetes Education.
Indian cricketers Virat Kohli and Surya Kumar Yadav have been named in the most valuable team of the ICC T20 World Cup 2022. Pakistan's Shaheen Shah Afridi and Shadab Khan have also been named in the team. Players from 6 different nations form the team led by T20 World Cup winning England captain Jos Buttler. Indian all-rounder Hardik Pandya has been named as the 12th man. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Financial Times reports the US midterm boost puts Joe Biden in strong position for second act. The Guardian reports the Afghan Supreme Leader orders full implementation of Sharia law. The Wall Street Journal reports President Joe Biden, Xi Jinping underscore opposition to use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine. The Washington Post says a fake tweet sparked panic at Eli Lilly that may have cost Twitter's millions. Japan Times reports that Philippines president looks to rebuild alliances in the Indo-Pacific region.
And now a quick look at the headlines once again. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reaches Indonesia on 3-day visit to attend 17th G20 summit in Bali to deliberate upon key issues of global concern at the summit. Mission Life is a global mass movement which promotes environmentally conscious lifestyle at individual level, says India at COP27 summit in Egypt. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres expressed hope that Russia will extend Black Sea grain deal to ensure global food security. UK and France sign agreement to tackle illegal migration. Turkish police arrest 47 people including Syrian woman for planting bomb in connection with Istanbul street blast. India International Trade Fair begins in New Delhi with theme Vocal for Local, Local to Global. And Spanish film director and writer Carlos Saura to be given Satyajit Ray Lifetime Achievement Award at 53rd International Film Festival of India in Goa. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnavajam by artists from Spain.
Yeah.
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.